Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I am Sarah Vine.
And I am artificial intelligence. No, I'm not. I am Peter Hitchens.
This is an AI version of Peter Hitchens. On today's episode, we'll be talking about AI, but also about Peter's specialist subject, Lucy Letby.
Many specialist subjects.
One of many. Do join us after the break. Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I am Sarah Vine.
And she is Sarah Vine. And I am Peter Hitchens.
You are determined, aren't you? You are determined yes. to be silly. This week we're going to be talking about an important topic of the moment, Lucy Letby. Also, thinking about AI and what it means for all of us. But first, over to you, Peter.
Right, well, the Lucy Letby thing is very prominent this week because of a very powerful ITV documentary which was screened on Sunday night, which I've actually watched 4 times, 3 times for preview purposes and once as an ordinary human being. And I would think that anybody who watched it, whatever their feelings are about the case, would be beginning to think that it is time that it was reopened in the courts.
Yeah.
Because there is now so much doubt about the prosecution case that it's only fair to everybody that this should be so. And the main thing which emerges is actually the prosecution case was extraordinarily weak and contained no actual facts, and that the defense case was even weaker. And nobody would want to be the defendant in such a trial, and nobody should really, it seems to me, to be happy if there is somebody in prison, and in this case in prison till she dies, it's a slow-motion death sentence, on the basis of a trial that has attracted so much doubt, not just for people like me, who are, as it were, amateurs, but from highly professional medical experts, a whole panel of 14 experts assembled from around the world. And this is a very interesting thing about this panel. The leader of it, a Canadian called Dr. Xu Li, was asked to put together this panel and re-examine the case. And he said, well, we will do this, but on condition that if we think that Lucy Letby harmed even one baby, we will say so in public. Her defense lawyer, her new defense lawyer, went to Miss Letby in prison and said, this is what Xu Li says. And she said, go ahead, give him everything you can. Which I think is very interesting, that she was unafraid of what the outcome would be, and that Xu Li, who's a very, very distinguished man, insisted on that condition before he would look at it. And when he came back, and this is actually some long time ago now, he concluded there had been no crimes. This is an amazing thing that happened when someone's been sent to prison for such a long time for so many crimes, that the leading experts in the world say there weren't any crimes. And what Xu Li also said was, if the hospital involved had been in Canada, it would have been shut down.
Yes. I mean, this is a man who has a very distinguished reputation, as you say, and he has effectively put it on the line, hasn't he? So is it the case that she was just low-hanging fruit? I mean, I remember when the verdict was first announced, I remember bumping into you in the canteen. Do you remember?
I do.
And I said to you, I'm not really sure about this Lucy Letby thing. But for me, that was more of a sort of gut feeling, because I'd followed it on a very superficial level. Obviously, I wasn't at the trial, but I just couldn't see how it could ever be conclusive. Really, that's what I was. That was my first thought. Was just I just don't think that this is conclusive, and it has to be conclusive, doesn't it, for you to be in life?
I think beyond reasonable doubt means a good deal better than well, okay, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think well, okay, maybe was basically what.
What it was, and I think there was a sense that people wanted to. Whenever anybody has pushed back against this verdict or questioned it or said maybe that there should be a retrial, the sort of automatic response has been, how can you say that? It's awful for the parents of the babies. And I completely agree that is the case. And I do, obviously, they've had a terrible, tragic loss, but that doesn't mean to say that if the person's not responsible, that they should be in jail. Do you not think?
I wouldn't have thought that any parent who suffered such a thing would want anybody else to suffer unnecessarily.
Yeah.
There's one other point that I do make to people who say this, which is quite simple. Did you object when the police began during their investigation telling the parents that their babies might have been killed or harmed deliberately? Of course you didn't.
No.
Because it was essential for justice that if they thought that this was even a possibility, that they had to break it to them that it might have happened. And it must have been fantastically distressing to be, on top of having lost your child or having a child terribly harmed, to be told some evil person has done this must have made it much worse. But nobody said then, oh, we mustn't pursue this investigation because it will upset the parents.
Yeah.
Well, exactly the same thing applies
Yeah.
here. Justice must be served, even if it sometimes distresses people. Nobody should be in any doubt about how awful it is for the parents. But I can see no advantage for any of them if somebody else is suffering and it turns out that she is suffering completely unjustly and unnecessarily, or how that could make it better for them. I think we mustn't argue this emotionally. That's half the reason why we've got into the mess that we're in the first place.
Is it possibly the case that these children simply died because they were very, very vulnerable and very premature and had serious problems? Is it the case that, so this is what I'm asking you, do we know for certain that they were killed? So if it's not Lucy Letby, then it has to be somebody else. So were they definitely murdered? Has that been proven? Or could it be the case that they simply died because they were already very, very fragile? And with tiny babies like that, many of them were very premature. I think the youngest was 37 weeks. Is that correct? I think 38.
Sorry, I don't.
I think that's correct.
They were very small.
So they were hovering between life and death anyway. So could they have just died?
That a bit? I mean, it's the key answer to it is actually given by another very distinguished doctor, Professor Nina Modi, who was interviewed in the program, and who says towards the end, she says with very measured language, that there is a very strong suggestion that the babies died because they were already very ill and may conceivably have received inadequate treatment. And she's one of the most distinguished neonatologists in the country, and she's entitled to say it. The other point that is often lost in this, in fact, it's not just lost, but it's reversed. People will say, well, the excess deaths at the hospital stopped after Lucy Letby was taken off the ward. Well, that's true, but it's a classic example of false logic, because what also happened at exactly the same time was that this small, not particularly well-equipped hospital ceased to have to take the very serious cases which it had been taking during the spike of deaths. And what Nina Modi again says was that the hospital was taking cases that it really wasn't equipped to handle.
Correct, yeah.
And so there is a completely valid alternative explanation for these tragedies.
Which is that simply they were very, very sick children, very ill and very delicate. And the hospital
they were seriously, in some cases, seriously ill or seriously premature in ways that particular hospital was not really equipped to handle.
Yeah.
Try as they might,
yes.
It was, and so one of the responses of the health service when this happened was to stop sending babies of that seriousness to that hospital.
Yes.
It tells you something, doesn't it?
Well, it does tell you something, but it also tells you that this idea that there always has to be someone to blame. It seems to me that if you're running a neonatal unit where babies who are very premature and who maybe 5 or 10 years ago would never have survived are now have a possibility of surviving and they don't survive, there's this sort of sense that there always has to be someone to blame. And actually,
I find that completely understandable.
Do you? Okay.
Completely. I'm not on any kind of warpath against the people on the other side in this. I think that the reporters who reported it, the doctors involved, everybody was acting in good faith. And I'm not trying to get up some sort of vindictive campaign against them. My only view is that there might here have been a terrible injustice. Somebody is having the most important years of her life eaten away by the locusts, while it might well be that she shouldn't be there at all. And we need to have the Court of Appeal to hear this case, which they've twice refused to do. Yeah. It's amazing to me.
What's their reason for it?
The main reason is procedural. The Court of Appeal is actually quite a recent invention in this country. Until the late 19th century, there was no appeal on a criminal case because jury verdicts were considered final. And they quite reasonably take the view that they shouldn't be got out to rehear cases just because they weren't held particularly well in the first place.
Because they didn't,
Well, that's all very well. But there was a recent LIBOR case in the people who've been alleged of fiddling some exchange rate. The Supreme Court released a couple of them. And what the Supreme Court said, amongst other things, in its judgment was that the appeal court was too unwilling to consider whether cases ought to be reopened, even if the case might have been made at the time. The attitude of the appeal court has been, in its two refusals, that basically nothing new has come
There's
up.
no new evidence.
But again, very fascinating part of the programme, Mark MacDonald, Miss Letby's new barrister, says, well, it may well be that they come back on this occasion with the same answer, but what is the sense in that if it's quite clear from what we've uncovered that her conviction is unsafe and that it's very likely that she didn't do it? And by the way, one of the former Supreme Court Justice, Lord Sumption, has also said that he thinks she may well be. This isn't just this is just amateur hour. This is serious people are worried about. What purpose would be served by saying, well, all this stuff could have been raised in the first trial and wasn't, so she can stay in jail till she dies, even though it's quite probable she's innocent? What sort of justice system
that's insanity.
Thinks that is a logical answer to the question?
I completely agree. So whenever I talk to anyone, sort of a layperson, about the Lucy Letby case, they always come back to me with one sort of thing, which is, well, what about the letter that she wrote? What about the notes that she wrote? Can you take us through that?
Well, I can. In fact, there are experts who are against her who say that this is worthless stuff. What she did was she was given counselling by the hospital during this period before she was arrested, I think.
But she was suspended at this point.
Well, what they did was they moved her to a meaningless desk job where she was not exercising any of her skills, and she had to pretend this had been at her own wish, which it obviously wasn't. And she was very distressed, and she became increasingly distressed. She was prescribed antidepressants. She began to take sleeping pills. Her life changed and became extremely dark. And she was offered counselling by a named person. We know the name of this person, though she's not talked about it. And one of the parts of the counselling which she was suggested to do was to write down her darkest feelings. Now, very interestingly, and it also emerges in the ITV program.
But was Lucy aware? Sorry to interrupt you, but was Lucy aware at that stage that she was under suspicion for these crimes?
I couldn't say precisely,
because I think that's an interesting.
I couldn't say. She was under suspicion of something from very early on. She knew the moment she was moved from her job and not allowed back on the neonatal ward. She knew that there were doctors in the hospital who believed she'd done harm.
Right. Okay.
So
could that have informed
the clouds were darkening around her.
Could that have informed her journey into her darkest?
Yes,
thoughts?
Very much so. But the thing is that this is a technique in counselling that you are asked to write down your deepest, darkest thoughts. And what is more interesting in some ways that her childhood friend, whose name she wants to keep out of things, also appeared on this program, said that when the two of them were at Sixth Form College together, they did a counselling course themselves in which they were taught this technique. And she has never at any stage admitted to the crimes, and I think the use of these bits of paper to suggest that it's a confession is actually wrong.
Right.
And people should get it out of their heads as any kind of clincher. She's always denied it absolutely firmly.
And her friends have stuck by her, haven't they?
Yes, they have. And this is also evident from the TV program. It's very touching, in fact. If tomorrow you or I were accused of and then convicted of a very serious crime, particularly one involving harming children, you would find there's an awful lot of people who you previously knew
would not want anything to do with you.
Your family might stick with you, but colleagues and friends would almost certainly peel away. In her case, this has not happened, and I think it's very telling.
What I wanted to ask also is, why is it that she was prosecuted? So what was the evidence that the CPS had that they felt was sufficiently strong to prosecute her with?
Well, you'd have to ask them, but what they had was a theory.
Right.
They had Dowie Evans, the distinguished paediatrician, and when he was presented with it, he appears to have volunteered himself for the case. Right. And he said, I can see this. I can see this is how she did this. And there's this enormous theory about how she used air, pumped air into babies' stomachs, or injected air into their bloodstreams. And this theory is a complete theory. It's not self-contained, and and they accepted this, and then there's also the argument about the supposed chart showing she was present at all the bad events. Which is so if you leave out quite a lot of the bad events.
Right, okay.
It's not really...
So not all of the bad events.
It's the Texas sharpshooter theory, if you've ever heard of that, where the guy shoots at the barn and then puts a ring around all the shots that actually hit the barn and says, what a great shot I am. It's not a proper statistical account of events. But all these things came... And once you've got a suspect... then I think you groupthink sets in. And again, I think this is understandable. And as far as I'm concerned, although the consequences seem to me have been terrible, we must forgive it. They thought something terrible had happened. They thought an evil person was loose in the hospital, and they thought they'd got her.
But they would have a motive, wouldn't they, for her being responsible?
Once it's been raised, once the suggestion's been raised that someone is and there are other cases of people in hospitals or doctors doing wicked things.
Well, there's
once the prospect's been raised and you've begun to take it seriously, then your mind will focus on things which bring you to the conclusion this person did it, and that I think is what happened. I think it's a very clear example of the old problem of groupthink. Once you've settled on a suspect,
no, you're right.
Everything begins. Yeah. If you were accused of some terrible crime, everything you did, every letter you'd ever written, every conversation you'd had, everything would suddenly become just like these notes that she.
Yeah, that's how people get cancelled, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but it's just no. It's worse than that. Once you're presumed by the authorities to be responsible for a terrible crime, everything you've done can be fitted into that pattern. And it was.
Yeah. And so you could, yes, you can sort of...
But it remains the case there is not 1/2 ounce, if you'll forgive the customary measure, of actual hard evidence that she ever did anything wrong. Nothing.
No.
Nobody ever saw her do anything wrong. So
whose decision would it be to give her a retrial?
Well, the Criminal Courts Review Commission has that job, and they're considering it at the moment.
But can Keir Starmer intervene?
No, the CCRC was set up because governments got sick of, after all the Birmingham Six and other businesses, they got sick of having to intervene in these cases, and they wanted to have it at arm's length. Yeah. And it was set up, but actually it wasn't set up very strongly, and one of the big criticisms of it over the past few years has been that it's been a bit weak and understaffed and underpowered. And it's got a new temporary chief, Vera Baird, who's supposed to be putting a bit of muscle into it. Right. But even then, even if the CCRC do refer it to the Court of Appeal, there's no guarantee the Court of Appeal won't turn it down again. So it's not. It also, I mean, it's a very long struggle. Once it's very, very difficult to reverse a guilty verdict. Once the presumption of guilt kicks in, and this is the problem in the modern prosecutions, is that there is, although technically we're all presumed innocent. Yeah, well, we're not. There is a presumption of guilt, and I'm afraid if you're relying on the English criminal justice system to keep you safe from wrongful prosecution,
you're hiding to nothing.
You're probably being a little bit complacent. It may not do so. This is. So I don't know. I don't claim to know that she's innocent because I couldn't. What I do know is that everything I've seen in the case against her is too weak to put somebody in prison for the rest of their life.
But the broader point, which is that you can't really trust the justice system anymore, is very worrying.
Well, that's another reason for pursuing this case, because if it's properly examined, and if in the end they do decide to reopen it, and if the result of that is that she is freed, as happened in a very similar case in the Netherlands a few years ago, then there mustn't there be a review of the justice system to prevent it from happening again.
Do you think that there's a question of the quality of juries? I mean, presumably her barrister can't have been very good at it. I mean,
I don't think. You have to, again, in all these things, put yourself in the shoes of the people involved. I think the defence, confronted with a normal case, would have been perfectly okay. I think this was an extraordinary case in which there was already an enormous cloud of suspicion surrounding the courtroom. You had to walk through that cloud of suspicion to get into that courtroom. And they didn't really know how to cope with it. But who would? I don't think Horace Rumpole could have got her off at her first trial, frankly. I don't think anybody could have. But do
you think that the way that the internet and social media, as you say, creates an atmosphere around trials like this, just means that always these convictions are going to be at danger of being very unsafe? Because, of course, you know, she's prejudiced from the second she walks into the courtroom at that stage.
True. I think there are lots of things. I think that from time to time we in the media have grown slack, and the Attorney General has grown slack in enforcing the rules about what you can say about cases. Yeah. I think we should be a good deal more careful.
Yeah, I agree.
And a good deal more willing to consider that people might not be as guilty as they've been made to look. I think that that's the thing which all of us in our trade should consider all the time.
Well, we were taught, that you couldn't say things that would compromise a trial, or the expectation that a jury is not going to go online and see stuff is completely absurd.
Well, you would think it's unreal, but you mentioned juries in general. There was a huge change in juries for the worse, actually now 60 years ago, which is not much noticed at the time. Roy Jenkins, my least favourite Home Secretary of all history, abolished unanimous vote.
I like that you have a table of Home Secretaries.
It's a long table, and there are some terrible people on it. Roy Jenkins is by a long measure the worst, because he did not.
Maybe we should do that one day. You should do a list.
He did things so damaging that, and this is one of them. He abolished unanimous verdicts. Have you seen the great film?
Yes, 12 Angry Men. Yeah.
Impossible once you've got rid of unanimous verdicts. It can't happen. One person can't stand up against the rest of the jury because they're just overruled. And the other thing is that he got rid of the property qualification. Now you say that outrageous that you should have a property qualification to own property to be on a jury. And I agree with you. But he got rid of it and didn't replace it with anything else. So there's no educational qualification, there's no qualification of experience of life. An 18-year-old, pretty much straight out of school, can decide your future.
Is it sort of randomly decided with a sort of tombola? I imagine it is.
Well, how you get on a jury, as far as I know.
Yeah.
It's just if you're on the electoral roll these days.
You just get asked.
If they go to votes at 16, I don't think they'll go to jurors at 16, because anybody can see that would be. But anybody who's 18 or over can be on a jury, and there's no requirement to have any experience of life. Indeed, there was another thing they used to do. I remember when I was doing trials in my early years on the Swindon Evening Advertiser, the jury oath, which they had to swear, involves trying the several issues joined before our sovereign lady, the Queen. It was a tongue twister. It was designed to pick out people who couldn't really read, because they had to read it off the card. And so either the defence or the prosecution, if they didn't like the look of a juror, could then object, and those objections have by and large been got rid of as well.
So you can't object.
In America, well, it's much harder. In American trials, it's a long process of jury selection where people object, but here you can't. So I think juries are not as powerful a defence of the innocent.
Do you think there should be some sort of exam that you should have to sit before you're allowed?
I don't know what it is. I don't. I
Just
think
a basic sort of exam.
18 is too young.
Yeah, I completely agree.
18 is too young. I think there's some sort of experience would be useful, but
it should at least be 21.
You have to have a test which doesn't look like some sort of only middle-class people need apply. You can't have that. There has to be a test which isn't that.
A basic test. Who is the Prime Minister?
But they have to be unanimous. If it's beyond reasonable doubt, then everybody has to agree to it. That has to be brought back.
Well, I think you have to bring it back. I mean, you certainly would have to bring it back in what would be capital cases.
Oh, you couldn't conceively have a capital case.
No, but you should have. I mean, there should be certain crimes for which you do absolutely have to have a unanimous verdict.
Any conviction can ruin the life of the person convicted. Therefore, it has to be a very high bar.
But that would be a starting point, wouldn't it? At least you could say we'll do it for murder, manslaughter.
No, I think it should pretty much tomorrow. It'd be brought back for anything that comes to a jury. It has to be unanimous. If you can't get a unanimous verdict, then you haven't proved your case. Just one final thought. For those people who are absolutely convinced of her guilt, what would you say to them? Well, I would say watch the programme, the ITV programme, which is called Beyond Reasonable Doubt, ? And is available on ITVX for anybody to watch it in their own time. And I would also recommend the book called Unmasking, Lucy Letby, written some time ago, actually, by Judith Moritz, the BBC's Northern correspondent, and Jonathan Coffey, who's been her producer. And they've both been very close to the trial. And the things they disagree, and I know Jonathan Coffey slightly. I don't know Judith Moritz. I respect her as a reporter. And they disagree about the outcome. The book, despite its title, is actually fascinatingly fair, and it lays out the doubts. And I'm not certain, so I would appeal to anybody who is certain to become as uncertain as I am. And I'm not asking people to change their mind totally and say she's not guilty. The more you look at it, the other person to look at is Josh Halliday, the Guardian's excellent reporter, the North of England editor, who was one of the reporters who witnessed the entire trial. And he believed after that she was probably guilty. And then he went to the Shuley press conference in London where the 14 experts came up with what they said. And he's described it as being like two worlds colliding. And since then, he has begun to be a doubter himself. Don't assume that if you expose yourself to all the arguments that you will remain as you are. But I ask you only to keep an open mind, because there is no more impregnable fortress than a closed mind, and it doesn't serve the person who's living in it.
No, absolutely correct. Wise words. Well, let us know what you think. Maybe you'd like to read those books, watch the documentary, get in touch. And before we move on, I'd just like to say that the Trial of Lucy Letby podcast, while also an in-house production, is made by a completely separate team and a very worthwhile listen to anyone interested in every detail of the trial and subsequent appeals without any bias or opinion. Thank you. We'll be back after the break to ask if the next generation of workers will be really vanquished by AI. If they're so worried, maybe they could stop using ChatGPT to write their exam papers? More after the break. Welcome back. I'm Sarah Vine. This is Alas, Vine and Hitchens. But first, a voice from the past, speaking about the future.
In your Brave New World Revisited, which was published about 2 years ago, you did claim that much of what you forecast had come true. I mean, for example, the use of drugs and this instance of people having their thoughts directed while they're asleep through music being played or messages being played through their pillows and so on. I mean, in which societies do you think that most of what you forecast has mostly come true?
I think when the technological and applied scientific means are developed, they just tend to be used. I mean, I think one can say that the whole history of recent times in relation to science and technology shows that if you plant the seed of applied science or technology, it proceeds to grow, and it grows according to the laws of its own being. And the laws of its being are not necessarily the same as the laws of our being. I mean, hence this sense which so many people have, and which I think one sees in so many societies, this sense that man is being subjected to his own inventions, that he is now the victim of his own technology and the victim of his own applied science, instead of being in control of it.
Well, that was Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, on the perils of the future. And I wanted to bring this up, well, A, because I know that you, Peter, look at your lovely happy face. Look at you. You look like you've heard the voice of God.
Well, I do think that Aldous Huxley was one of the cleverest men ever to live. And it's also, for me, a great joy to hear again the tones of patrician England being stamped out during my lifetime.
Yes, the BBC reported. But anyway, that was him being interviewed about his book. Anyway, this week there was one, there's always these surveys, but there was one that struck me which has found that 1 in 10 graduates are switching careers because they're worried that AI is basically going to mean that their degrees are worthless. I just thought it was a good topic to get into, and I thought what he said about man being slave to his own technology is fascinating. People have said, Elon Musk, all of these people have said that AI is going to revolutionize everything. And I just wonder, what are we all going to do when we've got nothing left to do because everything is being done by machines?
Well, I think a lot of the things that happen in our society that are more or less worthless or not worth very much can easily be done by machine, but I think there are a lot of things which can't be. So I think the reason why our society has so much fear from AI is because so much of what we do, of what government authorities do, of what companies do in many cases is rubbish, and AI can do it better than humans can because it's rubbish. But I think anything really involving courage, initiative, originality, or brilliance cannot be done by AI, and we don't need to fear all that much from it on that score. I've been in trouble on Twitter yet again recently because people keep using AI to try and resolve arguments about history or philosophy or politics. Were the Nazis left-wing and things like that. And they produce these AI answers saying, well, no, the Nazis were not left-wing, as if this was definitive. So I then challenge the answer, say, well, you're unaware of X, X, and X.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, Peter Hitchens is arguing with a chatbot. Well, I'm not. I'm arguing with the people who think that you can have that you can have definitive answers created by a machine.
Yes.
Also, it's quite fun arguing with a computer, just as chess grandmasters found it very entertaining playing against computers, the great Deep Blue tournaments and so forth. There's no harm in it, but there is harm in allowing people to think that these things can be the arbiters of what is right and what is wrong, because they can't be.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's funny. A lot of people say, oh, well, I'm going to retrain as a plumber because AI won't be able to do that. And it's very interesting because I would consider these very manual things that only humans with opposable thumbs can really do seem to be the one area where AI doesn't really have any agency. And so, you've become a landscape gardener or you learn to be a tree surgeon because that's something that AI just can't do. So that's quite an interesting concept, isn't it? That
plumbing is very difficult.
Plumbing is fiendishly hard, and so is electricianing, whatever it's called.
It is.
It's not called electricianing, is it? It's called...
Well, no, but we know what you mean, and it's even harder than speaking English. But
obviously, in my case, it is.
Well, we know you're a foreigner, really.
It's not my fault.
Unintegrated.
But yes, I think.
By the way, congratulations on using stones at the weekend.
Yes, I did. Did you see that?
Yeah,
I did it on purpose for you. I did it on purpose for you. I nearly mentioned you in the article, but then I thought I wouldn't.
No,
but yes, so I love the idea that we're all having to go back to we'll all go back to the soil effectively, because that's the only thing that we'll be able to do that won't be done by all the computers.
Well, we'll become like characters in H.G. Wells' novel,
yes.
the Morlocks and the Eloi, where there was there was subterranean slaves doing all of these pathetic, feeble, wet creatures who never did anything, living on the surface of the earth, trying to pretend that they were in charge when they weren't.
But Aldous Huxley was a fascinating man, and there have been men in this mould, haven't there? I mean, Michelangelo was one. I don't think
Aldous Huxley could paint, not least
maybe he didn't want to paint. But the point is he had this sort of incredible... His brain was just different, wasn't it?
It was. He was
it just better?
Well, he was one of the last survivors. Because he couldn't see that he survived. Everybody else of his generation was wiped out in the first months of the First World War.
Right.
They all went to the front, but he couldn't, because no army would have him because he couldn't see who he was shooting at.
Oh, was he as short-sighted as me?
Terrible, really, really bad. I don't probably correctable now, but he really couldn't see, and that's how he survived. Yeah. He was almost a lone survivor of another age. And listening to him tells you what the England of before 1914 would in some ways have been like. There were lots of people educated to that standard and able to speak with that much coherence, and they just vanished in most cases before they could have any children.
Gosh.
It's one of the greatest catastrophes of the modern world. It's like the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
But he was a survivor from before it. That's why he sounds so different, because he was. Yeah, I disagree with him, particularly on the subject of religion. But when he wrote about religion, he was fantastically cogent and intelligent about it, and wasn't jeering at it stupidly in the way that so many modern atheists do, but explaining why he differed from it and what made him do so in a way which you can only respect. And it's really refreshing to read. And the preface to the new edition of Brave New World, I think 48, when it's published, he said what he had really feared when he wrote it was that men would fall in love with their own slavery. And I think that's what's happened. I
think you're completely right. I mean, the obvious way is the sort of drugs and all of that. But do you think, because there's been such a deterioration in the standards to which people are educated, is that maybe why we just need the AI? Because
well, no,
we're just not clever enough anymore.
We need to recreate the standards of our schools and universities.
Yes, but we've tried to do that. That's been attempted and it's been failed. You failed. It's impossible to do.
It's not impossible. It's just difficult. It could be done, but it wasn't done.
Well, my ex-husband Michael Gove tried very hard, and then as soon as he entered even remotely choppy waters, everybody lost their courage and
Can I just say a small point about that?
Go on.
Your ex-husband was like a doctor who refused to use antibiotics to treat an infection.
Oh.
The simplest and most straightforward way of reintroducing rigor into education is academic selection, and he would not do it.
Yes,
he was against it. Yes. He wouldn't do it. That would do it. It's one of the reasons why Germany is so much. All the German-speaking countries of Europe are so much better educated than we are, because they have it. And he wouldn't. He was actually opposed to it, because I tried arguing with him about it. So I looked on it. It was like watching a doctor refusing to use penicillin. So, sorry, it hasn't been tried.
Okay, in the current political landscape, what should be done?
You just do it. The thing,
you can't. The government couldn't introduce academic selection. There would be an absolute uproar.
I promise you, we have huge, brutal selection in our education system at the moment, and it's done by money. If you haven't got any money, your child can't get properly educated, which is both stupid and wasteful.
True, yes.
If a properly conservative small C government were allowed party was allowed to stand in elections and could put forward a program in which that was part of it, it would sweep the country. People are sick of their children being on National Offer Day being told you can't go to the better schools because you're too poor.
There are problems with academic selection, I think, because in the old-fashioned way where it was done with the 11 plus, it depended a lot on which school you had gone to in your primary school years.
But you don't need to do it that way. I tell you, in East Germany, the communist East Germany, they abolished selection by ability.
Right.
There were some elite secondary schools which you could go to basically if your father was a member of the Communist Party or something like that, but otherwise not. When East Germany collapsed, in all the regions of Germany which had formerly been communist, the parents went and petitioned the new local authorities and said, can we please have our grammar schools back? What did they do? They brought them back.
But what was the selection
they've been a huge
process?
success. I visited one in a lovely town called Wismar on the Baltic and spent a day with the English class, all of whom spoke fluent English, and which was almost unknown in East Germany in the past. And it was fantastic. And they've been a huge success, having been brought back. But the selection in Germany was never by an exam. It was always done by
interview,
by interview and assessment.
Yes.
And also there were lots of second chances. Mind you, there were second chances, but I've written a history of this in this country and could go on for hours if you didn't stop me. So I won't make you stop me.
Because I think the problem with selection was the selection process itself, because it was very black or white, and there were no second chances.
No, it wasn't. It's not true. There were plenty of second chances, and wherever people did them where they could. The problem was that the government, again a conservative government for most of the very brief period when we had this system, didn't really believe in it, and so there were never enough grammar schools. In Wales, oddly enough, there were enough. It was very well equipped with grammar schools. It was one of the reasons why it was such a well-educated area, and why so many teachers are Welsh, because they were there in sufficient numbers. But for instance, in Surrey, very few, and various other parts of the country, very few, so it's very patchy. And then along came the great baby boom, the post-war baby boom, which hit secondary schools in 1956. And bang, they'd had years and years to prepare for it, building new grammar schools, having new places. They failed. What happened was that huge numbers of people who up till then would have got into grammar school were turned down, and they became unpopular. And so the next thing that happened was that the selection became unpopular because it was unfair. They got rid of it. All that could have been avoided by actually building more grammar schools and opening more places. But they did not do it because they didn't really care, because most Tory MPs sent their children to fee-charging schools anyway.
Of course, yes. Well, we've come rather a long way from AI.
Yeah, it's often the way, isn't it, with conversation?
But no, I mean, AI is now widely used in schools, and certainly at degree level, all the students use ChatGPT for their essay writing.
But there's also these things that are constantly badgering me on the internet, Grammarly and things like that.
Yes.
So people who cannot read or write properly are rescued by computers. Again, it's only.
But it just tells your brain to mush.
It's only because humans are not being taught adequately to do things which computers
Or do you think
do.
it's because humans are fundamentally quite lazy?
Yes, but that's why you have to have disciplined schools in which to teach them.
And do you think it's because humans are also trying to do everything far too quickly?
Yes.
Because I think there's a big element of that, which is that in the olden days you used to have sort of, a few days to write an article. Now you've got about 14 minutes.
Know about that.
Or whatever. Do you know what I mean? There's a sense that everything has to be done really quickly.
But that's my life.
We sort of live in an ADHD
daily newspapers
world.
For decades, everything does have to be
Well,
done.
no, but that's why
other people have it.
But if you've got a quick mind, you become a journalist. And that's why you and I are journalists, because we have quite quick minds. But that's lucky. That's just something that I suspect is part of our makeup, and it seeps through into everything. It's particularly there, I think, in politics, which is that everything has to be done so quickly, and it's all got to be now, and it can't. No one can actually go away and think about anything.
That's true. there is a problem there. But again, I'd say, going back to AI, a lot of the things which AI can do well are things which humans could do well if they were properly taught or trained.
I don't know.
In a society with declining standards of education, AI is a lot more important than it would be in a society.
But you'd have to be educated to a very, 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 very high level in order to process the amount of information as quickly as AI can process it. I mean, AI can scan the entire internet. If you say to AI,
it gets it wrong.
No, it does. But it doesn't.
I've caught in the past month. I've made a number of assaults on Grok, the Twitter version of AI.
Yes.
I ask it questions to which I know the answers.
Yes.
And it doesn't know them.
It doesn't know the answer.
And also, it amazes me sometimes. People ask me factual questions again on Twitter, and I say, well, I tell them, it took me 15 seconds of Googling to get you the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Why are you asking me? It's incredibly easy for a human to obtain information quickly now. And I suppose I have the advantage that I can generally tell a large part of the information on Wikipedia, for instance. I can tell that it's rubbish.
Yes.
Because I know enough to know.
Yeah.
And so I can judge. And I'm actually, in some ways, Google was invented for me because I'm well educated enough to tell when it's giving me rubbish.
When it's giving you the right answers,
which
yes.
Grok isn't.
Yes. But it seems to me that it's like, there's a constant skimming off the surface and what's left underneath is becoming thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. And you can ask ChatGPT very simple questions like, who was Henry VIII, and it will come up with a sort of perfectly sort of standard answer.
I bet you it will tell you who got divorced, which he never did.
No, he didn't, did he? He tried. No,
his marriages were annulled.
They were dissolved. That's correct.
Point.
Yes. But I do think AI and the access and the internet in general, actually, and AI is part of the internet, is changing the way our human brains work, and I think it's making us less curious and less imaginative, and I think it's generally turning us a little bit to mush because we take the path of least resistance. Humans are fun.
Take the path of most resistance,
I do. But we're not all like you,
Well,
Peter.
become more like me.
Okay, all right.
Become more like me. Take the path of most resistance.
Okay.
It's the one to take.
Yes, very good.
Steep and rugged pathway.
Well, let us know, ChatGPT, if you're listening. Do email in.
Send us the wrong answer.
Send us the wrong answer. It's time for some questions. My favourite part of the podcast. Do you want to start or shall I start? There's quite a funny one here which I want to read, which is not the first question, but I do want to read it out because it made me laugh. It's from Nathan Watson and it says, alas, Hitchens reminds me of Puddleglum from the Silver Chair in the Narnia series. I think that is a fantastic thing. I love that. I'm going to call you Puddleglum from now on.
Puddleglum is the hero. Is the absolute hero of the Silver Chair. Without him, everything would go wrong. He's the one who won't be overwhelmed by lies.
Here's another one that I quite like. This is from someone called Harry. And it says, I smoke chiefly as an assertion of independence.
Independence from what?
Just wait to listen to him. Before COVID, I was a very rare social smoker, but afterwards I took up smoking half back over a weekend on the logic, foolish logic, I know, Peter, that if the Tory and Labour governments, who had so fanatically advocated lockdowns, masks and green dogma, said smoking was bad, there must be something, if not good, at any rate, not that bad about it. Smoking also reminds me of other friends who enjoy a smoke with me, chiefly a lady called Lisa. When I light up, I think of her, which lights up the weekends, even when she's not there.
Well, I think we may have got to the root of the letter at the end. There is no logic.
Personally, he adds, I see no avoiding civil unrest in the next 10 to 20 years. As the government goes bust, the police lose control and we begin a descent into sort of South African-style second world country. Yes. Glad I could cheer everyone up. Love the podcast. Keep it up. We are all doomed anyway. So what is there, alas? Harry. I like Harry.
How do you mean?
Well, I just think he sounds like a jolly good chap.
I don't know. I think,
he likes a fag and he thinks
like
the end of the world is nigh.
I don't like his logic.
There's one here from someone called James Bruckheimer who talks about your books. You might wish to read it yourself.
I've read many but not all of your books and look forward to reading whatever you come up with next. However, I would very much like to know if you've ever considered writing a novel. So far you've only ever written polemics. I personally would love you to write a piece of political satire. Well, I have actually tried writing fiction, and I can't do it.
Really?
Yeah, I can't do it. It doesn't work. And
because?
Well, I just can't write it. It doesn't come. Anybody can write a good first chapter. I wrote a very good first chapter of a thriller set in Moscow, which I say I, because all, as we know, fiction is autobiography and autobiography is fiction, in which I kill somebody with a fax machine, but and then end up being shot at on a railway bridge.
I want to read the rest of
with
the book.
most fantastic start. But within 3 chapters, I had so many impossible plot conundrums that I abandoned it. So I can't do that.
But I mean, people read Gormenghast, and that's a mad book.
I don't know whether they do much, but I don't. I could never get on with it.
I think they'd be brilliant. I think you should definitely write a novel.
No, I can't. I'm not. It's not.
I mean,
it's not
political satire.
If he wants me to write fiction, then I suppose I could write my memoirs.
Yes, do that.
Then
I wrote my
would be
memoirs.
Totally fictional.
James, you can read my memoirs.
Yours are dripping with truth.
They are dripping with truth, yes. Would yours be dripping with truth, or would you just be killing people with fax machines?
It is the guiding rule of all writing. Autobiography is fiction. Fiction is autobiography.
Yeah. Yeah, so don't write a novel. Just write your memoir. Did you actually?
I'm not going to. You can't. If you're anybody's life impinges on too many other people's lives for you to write even a remotely honest memoir without hurting other people.
Mm. Have you ever killed anyone with a fax machine? Though
Actually, I haven't, but I have very much thought of it.
What's the method?
You just pick it up and hit them over the head.
Oh, okay. You don't sort of say.
No, I mean it begins. I return to my flat in Moscow, and there are secret policemen in it, and they don't hear me come in. And one of them is on the loo, and I hear him stealing my soft Western loo paper, and then he comes out. It's at that point
enrages you.
I get him with the fax machine.
Oh dear!
I was very much inspired by some of the work of a wonderful thriller writer called Lionel Davidson, who I think writes some of the best thrillers.
Is that what you like to read? Thrillers? Is that your?
I love good thrillers, yes, but there are so many bad ones. But Lionel Davidson is so good. There's this tremendous one he wrote entirely from imagination and research about Tibet, called The Rose of Tibet, set during the Chinese takeover, which is one of the best thrillers ever written. And another one called Night Frost in Prague, about a man who finds himself mixed up in nuclear spying in Prague without meaning to under the communist regime. Fantastic book. He did know Prague, and you can tell that. And he also, the third really brilliant one, A Long Way to Shiloh, about Israel before the 1967 war.
Oh, right.
And it's the only archaeologically based thriller I've ever come across, but it really is very, very good indeed.
Well,
he's my model, but I can't do it.
Is he still alive?
No, he died only about 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Oh, okay.
But he wrote a more recent book called Kalimsky Heights, which got a lot of attention.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah,
yes.
Which isn't actually as good as the early ones, but it's pretty good.
Okay, well, I might give him a
he was a genius of thriller writing, and he was the only Jewish submariner in the Royal Navy in the Second World War, as far as I know, and he taught his own mother to read.
Okay, well, he sounds
amazing.
So he should have written his
amazing
memoir.
Man.
Here's another one. Alas, I remember asking my dad, who is an imperial stalwart, to help me with my physics homework, and he insisted on converting everything into imperial to do the. Is this your son writing it?
No.
It is, isn't it?
No.
It's one of your poor children.
You have no idea how I struggle with my own children to get
to do the calculation and then converting it back. Every answer I wrote was wrong. Oh my gosh. A lesson was learned, though not the one I'd hoped, and I sought maths help elsewhere from then on.
I should think so, yeah.
I'm so sorry. This is Ian from Cardiff. He carries on, I do agree entirely that imperial measurements are more human. I'm sure this is the reason why TV screens, phones and bike wheels are regularly advertised in inches. I must admit that I do find working in base 10 easier. I possess an old wooden ruler which shows inches divided into tenths, and in engineering you have a 1,000th of an inch, commonly known as a thou. Until very recently I purchased coal by the hundredweight. Does Peter agree that a base 10 version of the imperial system might have seen off the metric system?
No, because it couldn't do. The customary system, I don't call it imperial, I call it customary. The customary system is as it is because it is based upon the actual dimensions and motions of the universe, which doesn't work to 10 base any more than the human body does, really, apart from your toes. But mind you, So no, I don't think so. There's nothing wrong with doing things in 12s and rather than 10s, or indeed in 14s and 16s. It's fantastic for your mental arithmetic.
He says, he carries on, perhaps you'd be interested to know that Cardiff Council still leases out allotments by the perch. Can you tell me what a perch is, Peter Hitchens?
No, I can't. It's also known as a pole, but I can't tell you what it is.
It's 16.5 feet.
Excellent.
What's that in real money?
Well, 16.5 feet. I don't use. I do chains. I can do, and furlongs I can do, but perches I can't do. But allotments, of course, were originally laid out in the years when we used nothing else, and probably by agricultural people. There are a lot of lovely English measurements like the truss of hay and things like that, which people don't use anymore, but they're customary. In old editions of of Arthur Mee's Children's Encyclopedia, published as the Book of Knowledge in the United States, there is several pages giving these more obscure measurements, and they're all so poetic. You put them all into verse.
And are they all agricultural based?
A lot of them are agriculturally based because that's when they were hundredweights. Of course, it's not 100; it's 112 pounds.
Of course,
because it couldn't. 100 would obviously, but they're called hundredweights. But the half hundredweight, the 56-pound bag, was very important when I was working in a brewery back in the 1960s. Right. I was slinging 56-pound bags of something or other, probably barley, around the brewery, because that was about as big as you could sling.
I must just read the last bit of Ian's email.
Oh, there's more.
I love Ian. He's hilarious. He says, I organised a hedge laying day once, of course as you do, for a local conservation group, and I requested that the landowner provide us with 6-foot stakes. On the morning we would start, we discovered that the landowner had instead provided us with 6 1-foot stakes.
Yes, well, it's sad. It's like the person who tried to lay out a cricket pitch with using 22 metres instead of 22 yards. But the hedge laying thing reminds me of a lovely thing about Shakespeare, where there's a point in, I can't remember which play it is, there's a destiny which shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. And a group of actors from the RSC were at Stratford, and they went out between plays for a wander in the Warwickshire countryside. And they found a man, 2 men in fact, laying a hedge. And they talked to them about it, and about halfway through it, one of them said, how are you dividing up the labour? He said, well, he shapes the ends, and I rough hew them. Still Warwickshire language. Yeah. 500 years later.
Still there?
Yeah.
That's lovely. We have one more email, again, about measuring. Measuring seems to be a very popular subject. Dear Sarah and Peter, alas, I was pleased to hear you discuss units of measure. I too loathe the metric system that turns people into finger-counting simpletons. That's me. I'm a finger-counting simpleton.
No, you're just a foreigner.
I am 23, and I was lucky enough to be brought up by parents that were taught in the imperial system, and they have passed their knowledge on to me. Sadly, children are not taught imperial units at school, and I fear this will mean they may be lost forever in future. Not if Peter has anything to do with it. Ricky Blake from York. Peter, you need to lead the fight to protect us from complete metrication. I will join you. It infuriates me to buy a jar of marmalade and the weight be given as 254 grams rather than simply saying a pound. The metric lobby is extremely sophisticated and dogmatic, and they are able to succeed because everyone else is apathetic. There is a well put together website called metrician.uk.
Metrication.
Sorry. See, I can't even read.
If I can say to Ricky Blake from the fine city of York, where I misspent some years of my own youth. 2 things. One, there is a fine body called the British Weights and Measures Association, BWMA, which campaigns against the total takeover of the metric system. And the other is that the reason why, if he looks at jars of marmalade, he'll find that they no longer say 454 grams, but usually something in the region of 350, is that they got rid of, when you get rid of a landmark like the actual pound, and you shift it into grams, which nobody understands, you can cut down the amount of stuff you're selling people and keep the price the same. And most people won't notice. But if you look at most jars of jam, very few of them now contain a full pound, whereas 40 years ago they all did. But the price stays the same. It's one of the reasons why some of us think metrication has been so popular among certain businesses, that you can do this. You can sell something for a higher price without admitting it, because you aren't giving short measure anymore.
I mean, the solution to that is to make your own marmalade, which is what I do.
It's very, very hard to make the kind of marmalade that I like.
Do you like very, very, very tawny marmalade?
Practically black. And
Yes.
it has to be able to, if you cut a cube out of it, it has to be able to stand up by
Yes,
itself.
that's the
outside
perfect
the jar.
marmalade. That is the perfect marmalade. My mother makes that marmalade. She has an old copy of Mrs. Beeton's, and you can make that marmalade if you have that book. That could go on the book list, Mrs. Beeton's Household Management. Also tells you how to make fudge. Talking of measurements, it has all these temperature measurements in them, which are quite interesting. One of which is, certain temperature points for making things like fudge,
Yes.
160 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, they both coincide at -40,
Something
which
like
is a temperature you sometimes reach in Russia.
Anyway.
And they are the same there, otherwise they're not. But the big thing
But it's
about
a great book.
the temperature gauges is the difference between being dead and alive is about 1 degree in Celsius and several more in Fahrenheit, which seems to me to be a strong argument in favour of Fahrenheit.
It also tells you, that book also tells you how to make one of my favourite foods, which is tongue in aspic or jelly. Delicious. My mother used to make that. Anyway, that's all we have time for. Thank you for listening. If you would like to send us an email or get in touch, you can at alas@mailonline.co.uk, or you can leave a comment on Spotify or send a voice note to WhatsApp 07796 657 512, and if you could start your message with the word alas. Thank you for listening.